sometimes called Tulsi, right? Is that the Sanskrit is Tulsi? So Sanskrit is Tulsi. It's sometimes sold that way in America. Same thing. Related to garden basil, but medicinally has a lot of different differences from garden basil. Do you want to cover garden basil too?
I do.
Okay, so we'll cover the distinctions. Let's start with holy basil. Okay, energy, anybody know? Direction is definitely upward. It is mood uplifting, spiritually uplifting, clears your mind. It has every trait of an uplifting herb by far. Somewhat energizing by being so uplifting. Its temperature is warm and its nature is drying. So based on Paul's lecture, that should remind us in Ayurveda, this herb decreases kapha, it decreases vata, and it increases pitta. So we do have to keep that in mind, because when a lot of supplements get popular in America, this might be too warming for some people's constitution, or we might have to blend it with something else. Kind of like turmeric is so warm and dry. So we might have to be careful or cautious with that. A lot of clients might come in having not like adverse reactions, but just constitutional reactions where they're getting too hot.
Mix it with cooling thing.
We just mix it with something cooling like peppermint, something simple, right? Licorice. Mhm. So there's three varieties. There's Krishna, Vana, and Rama. In Ayurveda, I don't know which variety we have here. I'll pass this around. This is holy basil. By the way, this will grow so easy in your garden. So will regular basil. They'll both self-seed after they go to seed, and you just kick the seeds around, and you'll have plants everywhere the next year. So in Ayurveda, I can't quite remember, but each one of these is. Oh, good job. Let's see it. Do you want to pass this around? So we have the Krishna variety and Rama variety here. If you want to geek out, I love the Krishna one the best. You'll smell it. The Krishna one has almost like a sweet smell and a little bit of a sweeter taste. Where the Rama one is obviously more pitta. It's more fiery and spicy. I don't know. It's unspecified. A lot of times when you buy it, it won't say. Some companies will combine all three together, so you got to kind of read your labels. So this would be geeking out. We don't necessarily have to know this, but it is, if you really want to geek out, it's helpful to know. What's that? Yeah, it's the same. They're all the same species, but these are different, I don't want to say cultivars, but they're different variations of the same plant. Because this is such an important plant in India, we're going to have stuff like this happen. Just like basil, like Italian basil, how many varieties of Italian basil? There's 30 varieties at least. So I love the smell. I think Krishna, we'll have to look at it. I think Krishna might be better suited for kaphas. I can't remember. Warm, drying, and uplifting. It's also very penetrating. Very similar to rosemary, by the way.
When you say energy, you also mean temperature?
Its temperature is warm. Mm-hmm. Holy basil is more similar to rosemary than actual Italian basil is to holy basil. As far as medicinally how they would use them, they're very, very similar. Okay. So psychologically, this is one of our main mood uplifting antidepressants. I think we've mentioned this before. Probably what is most exciting about holy basil is that it does not interact with any common medication that we know of. So you can combine this with antidepressants, like we cannot do that with St. John's wort. So this is something that no matter what type of depression or what drug people are on or psych meds or anxiety meds, we can always give holy basil freely. It's very safe and very gentle. Why would we use this during depression if somebody is already taking an antidepressant?
Because maybe the antidepressant drugs have extracts from these active ingredients.
Some antidepressants have side effects like maybe making people feel, a lot of patients will say, zombie-like or emotionless. Because this is uplifting, this can counteract some of those, I don't want to say zombie-like, but some of those numbing effects. A lot of patients say they emotionally are numb, and a lot of patients quit they will become energized zombies. Yes.
I agree. When you have a client that's already on something and they go way downhill.
Yeah.
Something traumatic happens in their life and they don't want to feel that
Yeah.
zombie-like, then we
Yeah.
kind of think like
Yeah.
to pull them up without putting them.
Yeah. What we find often is that antidepressants, when people are in a very acute situation, they enjoy the numbing effects for a while. And then after a while, they start to not like that feeling. And usually their partners also don't like that feeling because people become kind of like more aloof and withdrawn and just kind of numb or neutral. So this is also great when antidepressants just aren't working. This is a good way to help transition people off of antidepressants, right? If they want to, or if they're looking for an alternative, because we can combine the two and see how much improvement there is. But energetically, do you understand, like a lot of antidepressants, even though they're antidepressants, their directionality is actually downward. They're kind of downers in a sense, where holy basil is very uplifting. What's also really exciting about holy basil, if people are on antidepressants, is this herb has a strong affinity for the heart. So emotionally, it enters the heart. It opens the heart, it expands the heart, it emotionally opens the heart, and it physically opens the heart with blood flow. Just like rosemary, very similar to rosemary. Do antidepressants affect our heart or energetic heart or meridian heart? No, right? So this is unique to something that's alive, right? That has an intelligence. And Ayurveda, we also say that this is a sacred plant, that this plant is also good for spiritual sickness, spiritual depression, spiritual heaviness. One of the many reasons why it's often found in households in India or in America too, when people of like Hindu background and that, or yoga traditions, they'll have this plant because it's considered sacred. It keeps negativity away from people. So it's a sanctifying agent. So it can be burned just like sage. Instead of burning it though, a lot of cultures simply just have a plant growing in their house, like a house plant of holy basil. We can do the same thing with rosemary or basil too. They all have like a very emotionally uplifting effect on an environment. Okay.
By the winter.
So traditionally too, this would be good when also people have experienced a lot of heavy negativity. You're in a very toxic environment. We always like to use the word in class when people have energetic attachments, emotional attachments, spiritual attachments, energetic attachments. You're living in a environment that's very emotionally negative, like this, taking this internally, or wearing it, right? We can wear, what do we call those? Tulsi malas. It's called a mala, right? So we can buy Tulsi seed malas or little bracelets that are very common. You see them at like shops all around America. That's also considered to have the same effect. Have you seen that where they take Tulsi seeds and they actually string them into a bracelet? It looks like wood, but it's actually like a Tulsi seed for good luck, for positive energy. Its effects of the brain are the same, very similar to rosemary. It's good for people that have a very kapha brain, like very cloudy, very slower recall. Maybe in patients that have memory disorders, Alzheimer's, dementia, family history of dementia. You're so diligent. Family history of dementia, or even if people just have this would be more for like a heavy clouded mind, not so much like an ADD mind. This would be more for like a depression mind where you feel foggy and fuzzy and your head feels heavy and your thoughts are really slow. This would not be really for someone that has ADD that already has a lot of fire in their mind, right? Does that make sense? We wouldn't use this, right? Because ADD, we're going to lift more heat and activity to the brain. We don't want to do that. We want to do something the opposite with ADD. Does everybody understand that idea? We might put it in the ADD formula. Why? Yeah, maybe because the patient also has depression or something, but it would be balanced out though. So, okay. So rosemary is very similar. So it's often combined with rosemary or ginkgo leaf for memory disorders. What's our motto with memory disorders? We prevent them instead of treat them. It's very hard to reverse. Once Alzheimer's starts, it's very hard. It's easier to reduce the probability or slow its progression than it is to try to reverse it. Dementia would be the same too. We also use this for head trauma when people have a lot of depression after head trauma, which is very common, and have like just that cloudy mind. What are we calling that? Brain fog, when they have brain fog after head trauma. So it also is very uplifting. Constitutionally, it's going to have that lifting effect to increase activity in the head and brain. Okay. This is an herb that is a great tasting tea, by the way. This is a delicious tea. People love this tea. I had a friend, had a little falling out. This should have been maybe one of my first indicators. Pretty pitta person. Probably had a kapha imbalance though. And he came over one day, my house in the country. I lived in the country, and I made us Tulsi tea. It was just around, so we drank it. And he had this like, it got hot and flushed and had like this heart emotional reaction, then he was kind of like almost accused me, like, you and all you're trying to like open people's heart, and what'd you do? What'd you use? Like very like upset about it. So, he kind of like had a rap on his emotions, and the kind of like holy basil by opening the heart, like just spontaneously created this effect. So this is a very good herb to give people during the grieving process, during funerals, after funerals, when you're around, I don't want to say dead bodies, but like historically people's dead bodies would be in our homes for weeks at a time, right? This is only recently has the mortuary industry complex taken over America. But if you talk to your parents about it, they'll remember people being in their home for weeks or days. And, we all had a different relationship with death that we don't have today. That's actually illegal now. So, because of mortuary, there's a whole book written on the mortuary industry. It's scary. Mm-hmm. A lot of states have now reversed some of those things. Colorado's the best. They've made the most progress where people can choose how they have their funerals and all those things, right? Because like you can't be buried in a pine box anymore. It's illegal in almost all states. Not all, but mortician industry. Money. It's all money control. Licensing, money, control, sanitation, all these things. Yeah. Yeah. Colorado has, different, a lot of people are going there now to pass away even. We're different. And you can actually have old fashioned, like Native American style funerals where you like bonfire and, there's a lot of good books written on it. But anyway, the important point is that if we're going through a grieving process or know people, this is like an easy thing. You can even bring them like behind the scenes, like, hey, sorry for your loss. I brought a little tea packet, holy basil tea, rose tea. This is like a great way you can work kind of behind the scenes. This is great for people with depression that you can kind of, because it's a tea that's fairly tasty. So a lot of people drink this tea. This is also an herb that works for depression and mood uplifting. You'll feel it today. Like it works pretty fast. It works great as a tincture. It's amazing. My favorite, but it works great as a capsule. Some of the companies make like a very concentrated capsule, like Gaia's liquid capsule. Do we have one open at all anymore? When you bite into that thing, it's like you can just feel your brain and heart go like just uplifting. So it's very quickly noticeable herb. Not all herbs are like this, but the uplifting effects are pretty quick, especially if you have a really good product.
How long do they last?
The capsules,
Well, yeah, how the uplifting effect.
it builds, but I mean, you'll feel it quickly, sometimes like immediately when you take it within an hour or so. If you're really sensitive, you might feel it immediately. But the effects, if you're taking it every day, they will continue to grow and you'll get like more and more uplifting usually. It's not a true adaptogen, but it often is shown up in adaptogen books because it is somewhat energizing, but it does not actually, and it affects cortisol, which is a adrenal hormone. So this is one of the best herbs that we do for people that have either super low or super high cortisol from adrenal fatigue. But I want to be really clear that in my opinion, this herb does not restore adrenal function, but it is great mixed with other adrenal herbs.
Oh, wait.
It's good for increasing or decreasing appetite. Not so helpful for like thyroid. One thing in Ayurveda, they do say this herb directly increases prana or vital life force. So, I mean, we could say it does have some energizing properties. It just doesn't have that like restorative effect that like ashwagandha or American ginseng or some other adaptogen would have. So I want to make that really clear because a lot of books in modern times like kind of misplace it there.
Basil.
Mm-hmm. You can use holy basil oil. It's a great aromatherapy. We should have diffused that today. It would have been good. This is a very good herb when people have dark thoughts, like suicidal thoughts, This would be for like more psychiatric type things, like fantasizing, hurting people, people with some more concerning like thought patterns. It's also just great when people have been traumatized.
Nicholas,
Mhm.
a lot of times people be on antidepressants and then they stop working as well, and then the doctor prescribe another one. Is
Mhm.
it reasonable to sometimes do a little bit of holy basil in between
Yeah,
the doses?
that's exactly right. So Paul's saying a lot of times antidepressants, people remember there's no drug or therapy or anything that's ever been shown to be clinically consistently good for moderate to severe depression. There's nothing that's really been truly researched, no prescription drug, anything. So we need all the help we can get, right? So often people are put on one antidepressant, they kind of start to plateau, and then usually the psychiatrist will add another antidepressant, or sometimes they call it background support or things like that. So it's often really good to try something like holy basil first before resorting to that. Okay.
Holy basil doesn't do that, it won't lose it off that capital.
Herbs usually don't habituate at all. That's like a general trait of herbs that's pretty consistent. Some people that have certain constitution, like with that MTHFR thing we keep talking about with the liver, people can habituate a little bit to everything. But in general, we don't see that much with herbs. Once you know holy basil works for you, it'll probably work the rest of your life. Most herbs are like that. Once you find your antiviral herb or combo that works, it tends to work. Maybe not every virus, but most of them. Yeah.
Maybe that's why a good Italian marinara cheers you up.
Yeah, it does. Marinara and things like that with all the basil and spice, it can be medicinal. I always tell people like pesto is like one of the most medicinal things you can ever eat. You're getting like a pound of freaking basil and a serving of pesto sometimes, or half a pound, especially the way that I make it. Um, yeah, I've add holy basil to pesto. You can make pesto anything.
Yeah, maybe that's a lot.
Rosemary, yeah. Um,
Different nuts.
I add lemon balm to pesto sometimes, all kinds of things. So spiritually too, I just wanted to remind people too that this is considered a very spiritually uplifting plant. So what does that mean clinically? Okay, this is like a traditional idea, but what does this mean clinically? When would we use that wisdom?
Someone had lost their faith in their religion.
Yeah, so someone has lost faith in their religion or spiritual practice. I always like to use the word people have lost inspiration. They've lost a sense of connecting to their purpose or inspiration or purpose or life direction. Um, when we're trying to find our life direction, we want our mind to be crisp and uplifted and active, right? That helps us to get there. It's also just good when people are in what we call a funk and they just cannot get out of it. A life funk, an emotional funk, bad decision funk. Whenever we're trying to like break the cycle, we do a lot of these. We call them spiritually uplifting plants. Catalyst. So it's also used for meditation, but more so for helping people feel alert and not like fall asleep during if you're the type of person that falls asleep when you try to meditate or relax. It's better for that, like helping you feel. A lot of times it's used by people that do like Tai Chi or yoga because it can kind of help you feel more, I would say, zen, more alert while you're doing it and more focused. Okay, so in Ayurveda, we say it actually opens the third eye chakra specifically. So it has that additional advantage. So used for meditation often. Okay. Um, it is also a carminative, which we'll talk about today. And carminatives, meaning we're going to use it for what?
Yeah.
Bloating, gas, cramps, digestive cramps, digestive pains, burping, just kind of weak digestion, poor appetite, right? Um, gas, bloating, yeah, any kind of cramping, any kind of spasm. Okay. Allegedly, there's more and more research that it can affect blood sugar. I've never seen it like clinically do that, but it can be helpful for like type 2 diabetes, more for the insulin resistance. But don't take it expecting that it's going to drop your blood sugars drastically. But it is supportive to cortisol in general and insulin sensitivity. So, okay. Also, traditionally, it's very antiviral. A lot of research, like all basils, very antiviral. All basils are very diaphoretic. They will induce the sweat. But remember when we talked about all the ways to know an herb, and we had that weird Ayurvedic term called uh, prabhava? Remember that? Or I don't know if is that how you say that? Prabhava?
Yeah.
Prabhava? Remember what that means? It means like special effect. So this is how a lot of ancient masters, I think, just rationalize like, oh, this is, an herb that does all this, but also this doesn't make sense. So we just say, oh, it has special property. Like wild bergamot, right? Is very hot and spicy, but we use it for burns. It draws heat out. That's kind of unusual. So the unusual prahaba of holy basil is that it's used for all fevers across the board of an infectious nature, whether it's bacteria, virus, hot, cold, which is good for all fevers from an infection. So it's used at the onset of cold and flu. Okay. So it has a lot of antiviral properties, but especially as a diaphoretic. And it's also an expectorant. So if we have cold, wet mucus that's really thick, whitish, right? We're going to use this to help that. Cold, wet mucus, a wet, heavy, productive cough. So we're going to use it for kind of lung infections. Okay, so that's holy basil. Also, you'll see a lot of research with it that it's a general, very powerful antioxidant, which means it's just going to have a lot of disease preventative properties. It's pleasant though, right? Yeah.
Is it safe for kids?
This herb is very gentle, very safe. No major known drug interactions. It's safe for infants, children, adults, the elderly. It's very well tolerated. I've never seen anybody have like an actual negative physical reaction to it. I've seen some people like feel, ooh, like a little emotionally, like a release. So it's just one of the best herbs to know. And it said tincture, tea, syrup, glycerite, capsule. It's all pretty good. And it tastes decent, right? You could get somebody to drink this that wasn't super into tea, probably. Maybe, right? I think it's good tasting. How many people like it? Yeah,
Many people, but,
like it?
um, is cooking it like, it changes properties at all?
Cooking it does not seem to negatively affect its properties at all. Okay. So let's do, just while we're here, let's maybe do regular basil. Call this garden basil. So there's, what's the same? Does anybody want to guess what's the same properties as holy basil for garden basil? It's uplifting. So we're going to use it for depression, anxiety. Garden basil does not have the immediate attention focusing effects as holy basil, though. Holy basil is way more effective for concentration and focus. The reason is it's uplifting. The difference is garden basil is very cooling. This is important distinction because this gives garden basil some of its different properties. So one of the main uses for garden basil is what? Because it's cooling. They're both used for fevers, so they're the same that way, except this one's going to be, garden basil is going to be more cooling. But the difference is garden basil is very specific for menopause and menopausal hot flashes, one of the quickest acting herbs for menopausal hot flashes.
Forget. You need something right now.
Pretty quick, where you can drink it and you might feel hot at first, but then you'll often feel cooled down. It's going to take a month for it to really, really like regulate. Always takes a month for a hormone herb to work. So for menopause, we combine it with things like blue vervain if women are having like hot flashes that are out of control. Okay. Remember we said 90% of women can do it naturally. Can treat menopause naturally without having hardly any symptoms, hot flashes, problems. 10% of women, it just not quite strong enough. Most of that 10% would be somebody that's had a total hysterectomy, though. So most women, at least 90% can do it naturally. It might take a while to figure it out, but I've only known 2 women, maybe 3. Maybe 2 that never seemed to get the relief that I thought was possible. One, we eventually figured it out. Took a long time. But most women can do it naturally. It's very good. It actually contains trace amounts of estradiol. So it actually it is a phytoestrogen. It has trace amounts of estrogen-like compounds. So it's very different from holy basil that way. Also different because garden basil is a little bit different in that it's more, holy basil is calming to the nerves, but garden basil is very nerve calming. In fact, we use it as a nervine a lot. It's very calming to the nervous system, where you can kind of tell by drinking. Holy basil is really invigorating in a sense. It is good for anxiety, but nowhere near as much as garden basil. This is just garden basil from the store, right? We never buy any trademark patented basil, right? We don't do like chocolate basil, and we don't do whatever this trademark, this or that. We just do Italian basil, plain basil, non-hybridized basil.
The purple basil would be a hybrid.
Purple, I don't know. That might not be. I don't know. Yeah, not always.
There are hundreds of kinds of basil. And a lot
Yeah.
of them are Italian.
Yeah.
Right. Thai basil.
Like holy basil, a lot of Americans don't know this. This just upsets me so much. That in Southern Europe and Greece and Italy, garden basil is the holy basil of their culture. It is like the sacred plant. They would bathe people in it if you were sick, if you had the evil eye put on you, or if you had a negative attachment, you'd be bathed in it, you'd be splashed with it, you'd have it tied up in your house, you would sleep on it. I just got this book on Polish folk customs where people actually sleep on a bed of basil. They put it in their mattress historically to keep negativity away, just like we would smudge, and they would grow it in their house and have it in their house and everything. Basil, you would put a pot of it on and just make tea so the aroma diffuses through your house to uplift everybody, to sanitize the air. It just has so many cool uses. So it is also spiritually really uplifting, we would say. You just It just bothers me that people don't know how, and you don't have to burn sage or things like that. We have all these thousands of plants. I mean, sage is great, but right? I mean, just basil, basil. The carminative effects are the same. We use it for gas, bloating, indigestion. Oh, I also forgot to mention they are both very antifungal. So garden basil and holy basil are very antifungal. Another difference is that garden basil kills parasites, certain parasites. How effective is this for certain parasites? If you want to freak out, I'll post a video if I can remember tonight. In South America and in parts of Europe, there's a certain parasite that gets in your eye. The Chinese doctor I studied with actually checked everybody for it. You know how you get it out? Even like in modern times? No? You put fresh basil leaf by the eye and the parasite's attracted to it and it comes out of the eyeball. And then they take tweezers and they pull it out. I will send you a medical video of it. I'll put it in Thinkific if I can find it. But garden basil does kill certain parasites. Remember, when we say something kills parasite, there's like thousands of parasites, just like viruses. So it doesn't kill like every parasite ever, but it helps a lot. So a lot of similarities, but there's a couple really quirky differences with garden basil. I would say there's also a tradition of basil in European culture of being used as what we call like a love medicine. We talked about that, right? Where people would like sprinkle it on people or touch people with it to make them fall in love with them or something. Different cultures would have different ways they would do this. You would take a picture of like your crush, right? You would put basil on it or something. Yeah, different ways you would do that. What else for basil? Anybody else have any other basil uses? It's great for lice, also topically. Their basil, I would say, is probably garden basil is a little bit better as a bath for cold and flu. Holy basil is too, but
Good for gums, right?
it has a lot of antiseptic properties. So both the basils are very good for like gingivitis. A lot of people have bad breath. People have bacteria overgrowth in their mouth. These things will kind of kill the bad germs without like affecting your microbiome, right? Okay. So they're both good for yeast, fungus. I think that's it. They're both very heart driven on a physical level and an emotional level. Oh, one other difference. One key difference. I love the taste. I like both of them, but I mean, I probably like garden basil better. Garden basil is very used a lot in herbal medicine for pelvic blood flow. Also used for fertility and infertility with women, not so much men. How garden basil is often used in like Southern American traditions, like South America and that, in a lot of indigenous tribes, is this would be used as a steam, right? Or yoni steam, right? Where you're gonna have like a wicker chair and you're gonna sit the patient on it. So you'd use this for a lot of gynecology conditions. You could also use it with men for prostate problems. And you put a pot of the boiling herb under you. So it's steaming you with the steam, and you put a blanket over your waist. So it's kind of like a sweat tent for your lower body. But you can also just do a sweat bath with it too. Or you can just do a sitz bath if you don't want to go through all that. You could just put it in your bathtub and just sit in it too.
Describe both basil to something.
I often use double basil sometimes. Double basil. I don't know about all the other varieties and how authentic some are, and there's probably a million pieces of forgotten wisdom we're just blowing right over. So in Ayurveda and probably like Italian, Greek, Spanish traditions, there's just probably a ton of wisdom that we're bypassing. So, but just know it's unlimited potential for the basils. Okay.
Any difference between the leaf and the stem?
The stems are also used, not just the leaf. The roots and seeds are used differently, but they're not really commonly used that way anymore. But the stems, we just throw the stems and everything in. What I usually do when I harvest basil or make pesto, you just strip the stems, and then I just save those. I dry them and I save them for baths for later in the year. Just put them in like a paper sack. Just throw them in your basement or garage, and you just use those to make like a big pot of a big boiling pot of tea to put in a bath during winter. So, okay, all right. Basil also, garden basil is very good also for the nerves of the spine. You can massage it into the nerves of the spine. You can use the essential oil. You could do a compress or a plaster on the spine. Used a lot for damaged spinal nerves. Okay, cool. Last questions on the basils? I don't know, like traditionally what yeah, I don't know if pine nuts, I think it always tastes better with real pine nuts.